Hi guys, I'm here in my pajamas because 2021 doesn't deserve anything more from me to talk to you about my trash fire of a reading year. I've been seeing one of Memento Mori's old tags floating around this year, and it's really fun. I think it was 3 years ago that he started this tag, and so I wanted to do it for old time's sake. It's the book postscript tag. So I'm going to be riffing off some of these questions and then at the end talking a little more broadly about reflections on my personal reading. Question 1 is, what is the longest book you read this year, and also the book that took you the longest to finish? I'm going to expand on this because I think it made me realize something new about my reading year. So I'm going to talk about this more at the end of the video, but combining my Goodreads totals and manuscripts and things, I've read only about 60 books this year. But when I looked at this question, I realized that I've read 12 books over 500 pages, and 10 of those are over 600 pages. 2 of those are crime novels by Elizabeth George, Believing the Lie and Just One Evil Act. I read 5 fantasy novels over 500 pages. So one was Son of the Shadows by Juliet Marillier, The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, The Lines of Al Rassan by Guy Gabriel Kay, and then 2 Robin Hobb books, Fool's Quest and Assassin's Fate. I'm actually finishing up Assassin's Fate probably today, maybe it'll bleed a little bit into January, but the majority of it will have been read in 2021. One classic, The Small House at Allington by Anthony Trollope. 2 nonfiction books over 500 pages, The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. Warmth is a hard word for me to say. And The Future is History by Masha Gessen. And then 2 contemporary novels, Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead and The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. So I think of all of these beasts, these 2 are about 850 pages each. That did put my reading in context a little bit. I mean, still accounting for this, I haven't read much this year compared to in previous years, but I mean, that's a significant portion of my reading that was very involved. And then I'm not exactly sure which book took me the longest to finish because I'm really inexact about what dates I put on Goodreads. Mostly when I remember to record that I finished a book is when I record that I finished it instead of the actual date that I finished it. Same goes for starting a book. Goodreads is just a record for me that I have read something instead of actual timelines. But I think that both The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells and The Unwomanly Face of War by Svetlana Alexievich took me over a month. These are the kinds of nonfiction books that are described as unflinching, and I, the reader, was flinching my way through them. Well, I loved question number 2. What is a book you read this year that was outside your comfort zone? Easy answer to this. I read The Postman Always Rings Twice by James Cain, which is a kind of classic 20th century noir crime novel. And what I loved about it, and it was so unexpected, is that it's heavily influenced by a French classic I've read called Thérèse Raquin by Émile Zola. And so it's about a man who becomes involved with another man's wife and them sort of plotting potentially nefarious things and everything that spins out from there. And The Postman Always Rings Twice is so masculine in feel in a way that I enjoyed because it's not what I typically read. And it also is one of those books where there are so many holes in it purposefully in a way that goes far beyond your, traditional unreliable narrator feel. There's so much more subtlety woven into that book. Number 3 is a revealing question for me in 2 ways. It is, how many books did you reread? Now, I only count it as reading a book if you read every word. So technically, I reread 0 books this year, which not great. However, what I will say about this is that I revisited more books this year than ever before, and I didn't put that pressure on myself to read them cover to cover. One of my favorite books to dip in and out of throughout the course of the year was Illness as Metaphor by Susan Sontag. If you're not familiar with this, when Susan Sontag herself was diagnosed with cancer, she wanted to reflect on cancer's role in society and the way that it's viewed culturally and the way that a person with cancer is then viewed and treated. And to do this, she compares it to the history of how tuberculosis was treated societally before it was eradicated. And it's completely fascinating, and especially because a lot of our observations about cancer don't entirely hold weight now. I think this is a snapshot of how cancer was viewed at the time. Question number 5 is, what is a book you read for the first time that you look forward to rereading in the future? And I have 2 answers for this one. One is my most recent read, and it's catapulted onto my favorites list Music for the Dead and Resurrected by Volshina Mort. These are poems, and she is a Belarusian poet who writes both in Belarusian and in English, and this particular collection was written in English. And I'll speak more about this in my upcoming video, but I basically have already read this book twice because each poem I went back and wanted to reread it immediately. And then the other answer is Abigail by Mogda Sobu. I loved The Door, and I still prefer The Door to this novel, but they're so different, really. This is about a young girl who, on the eve of World War II reaching Hungary in full force, is sent to a remote and strict boarding school. And I'm going to speak about this in a video that I hope will be coming up in the next few months, because I want to compare this book to several others coming out of Eastern Europe that I think are unconventional novels in the way they address World War II. Question number 6 is, what is your favorite single short story or novella that you read this year? And I barely read any short stories, but a part of that is that I've been making a real focused effort on my physical TBR. But I actually came into 2021 having read every single short story collection that I already physically owned. My favorite novella was The Pearfield by Nana Ektumishvili, and this is translated from Georgian by Elizabeth hewo. And I have a full review on this book that I'll link below. And I'm also going to speak about it in my favorites video coming up. So briefly, I'll say that this is about an 18-year-old girl who is still living at the school where she grew up. It's a residential school on the outskirts of Tbilisi, and it's a school for both mentally and physically disabled children. Number 7, Mass Appeal, a book you liked and would recommend to a wide variety of readers. And my answer for this was almost instantaneous. It's My Heart by Semazdine Mehmedinovic. This is translated from Bosnian by Celia Hawksworth. And especially the first and third sections of this book, I think would resonate with so many people. The second section too, but the first one is about Mehmedinovic experiencing a heart attack, or, you know, a character who's closely linked to the author experiencing a heart attack and being surprised at the vulnerability and mortality of his own body. And then in the third section, the character's wife suffers a stroke and some memory loss. And those two sections pair so well in terms of their reflections on what makes you internalized and externalized in the form of the people that you love. Question 7 is Specialized Appeal, a book you liked but would be hesitant to recommend to just anyone. I mean, I feel like the majority of what I like falls under this category. I've learned that over the years on BookTube. But the specific book I chose for this that I read this year is How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. I really liked this book, and again, like, generally would recommend it, but with some specific caveats. Cover, the title and the subtitle, and like the sheer topicality of it would make a lot of people think that it is more generally approachable than it is, and it doesn't intend to be. This is quite an intellectual book across a spectrum of what you might consider intellectual. So she talks a lot about various, you know, art and performance installations and exhibits, and she's very involved in that sort of abstract scene, and she brings that into her ruminations on the attention economy. The book is quite meta in the way that it is not forcing itself into a specific structure, and it lets its own thoughts wander down certain paths that might not ever circle back to what she was saying before. I think a lot of people would think that this book is very pretentious, and, you know, semantics wise, I don't agree with that, but experience wise, I understand what people mean. And I think that that's useful information for you in terms of researching the book and really deciding if it's something you want to read. The last question in the tag is asking you to reflect on your year as a bookish content creator, parentheses, goals met, good/bad memories, favorite videos you made, etc. This year was so up and down, wasn't it? I mean, you could say that in like every aspect of this year for every single human on the planet, but I really had a lot of ebbs and flows to my channel, and it's interesting too, because I think in the beginning of the year when I felt like such a mess and I was posting so irregularly, that was actually when I was still kind of getting more consistent views, I think. And then from September on, I've had a real renaissance. I felt a lot more energized. I've had more time and more passion to devote to the channel. And I've been a lot freer with myself in terms of, doing the videos that require a lot of preparation, like full reviews, but then also, setting myself loose a little bit to be more conversational. I'm still like over the moon about the level of engagement and views that I get. It's just, like that contrast of when I felt like such a mess and was, theoretically, numerically more successful. Just in terms of what I have done this year, I've loved making videos, and especially from September on. Favorite videos, I have to go back and look, but I know instantly that my favorite video that I filmed this year was the one where I talked about Little Women and March. And I really tried to make that a video that would be like viewer friendly for somebody who had read Little Women as many times as I have, or somebody who's never read Little Women at all and has never really wanted to read it. I don't think you need to have read it to, get something out of that video, or at least I hope. I think the non-favorites video that's gotten the most views this year is my random look what I got for Christmas video on Robert Alter's translation of the Hebrew Bible, which is just delightful to me. I can't believe that people watch that video and discover it and seem to like it. Then I'll also shout out my review of No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood, because I had a really mixed opinion on that book, and it was also my return to single book reviewing, which is something that I've done a lot over the years on the channel. But if you haven't done it in a while, it can be intimidating to get back into it. And I'm really happy with how that one turned out. Those are the postscript tag questions, but I just wanted to talk a little bit more about what 2021 has been like for me as a reader. And the answer in one word is challenging. I was struggle busing a lot this year, and I've also experienced like 4 or 5 major life transitions all at the same time, any one of which would have made me stumble a little bit, and I have felt really unsteady on my feet for a while now. I don't want to idealize this in an exaggerated way, because the uncertainty has been so difficult and so anxiety inducing in a lot of respects. But there also is a lot of possibility in that kind of uncertainty and these bursts of excitement when I've really understood the full scope of that possibility. And there are several things that I'm hoping to pursue next year that, if they work out, would be, just a huge change. And changes for the better. I may go into more detail about all of this at some point. I won't be this cagey forever once certain things are decided, but I'm not quite ready to talk about all that in depth yet. In terms of my reading, 60 books is the fewest by far since I started my channel. That's like the level from the year before I started BookTube, when I think I read somewhere around 55 to 60 books. Before I fell down the BookTube rabbit hole and my TBR exploded, right? This is kind of like what I would have read if I weren't a booktuber, weren't a book reviewer, hadn't worked in publishing. I went through huge slumpy periods. But what's interesting is that I know I'm speaking about this in a negative way, but I honestly don't feel bad or strange about it at all. Looking back, like, I know what I've been through this year, how many things have been going on, what I've been juggling. And you know what? Like, I've been self-conscious about this for a number of years now, being a public reader. Now I have the experience of reading what's like not a lot for me. And you know what? I wasn't ejected from my seat into the outer atmosphere, okay? I think it's funny, my tendency to overthink certain things and become neurotic about them in the abstract, like hypothetical thing that could happen. Oh my God, what if I don't read many books? And then when it actually happens, I'm like totally chill with it. I think that's a useful life lesson to tuck in my back pocket. The last thing I want to talk about is so incredibly random, which is why I'm saving it for those of you who've stuck around. This is the other major contributing factor to me reading fewer numerical, like technical books this year. And that's that for the very first time, I discovered online manhwa and manga. You guys, I must have read, I don't even know how to estimate this in my head. It must have been thousands and thousands of pages. And it's not the kind of stuff that I'm sure I would feel comfortable recommending. I mean, if I were to speak to any of you, like meet up with you in a cafe and just be talking to you, I might give you a few titles. But a lot of this stuff is translated by very informal online teams, kind of whoever they can get to be on board for a series. These are serialized publications online. The translations vary from what seems to be excellent to like what's very obviously janky. But broadly, I can say that the types of stories I gravitate toward are often more like epic fantasy settings, and particularly like historical fiction fantasy settings. And I've read so many reincarnationist versions of these stories. You guys, this is a huge category in online manga and manhwa. By the way, manhwa is like both the Korean and I think the Chinese version of manga. And the reincarnationist stories can follow two types of paths most typically. It can be that you're like a contemporary person who's then reincarnated into the body of a person in like a famous historical period, or into the body of like a character in a novel that you were reading. Or it can be that somebody dies and then goes back to a certain point in their life and gets to relive the rest of their life and make decisions to try to avoid their death. I can't even explain to you the kind of joy that I've gotten from this type of thing. It's really reminiscent of my love for Regency romances in that, you know, there's something really comforting and secure about a formula and knowing so many of the beats that a story is going to hit. But that's a simplistic way of looking at a formula also, because what that allows for is for you to really hone in on the details and on the variables within any given story. And so these variables take on so much greater importance. A lot of these stories have just breathtaking art. Like they really, really do. And I have loved getting to know my own like tastes in terms of what manga art I prefer. I can't believe I just said that sentence. Wow, 2021. It's like really done me in. Anyway, that's going to be it from me. Was it a great or even a good reading year? Absolutely not. Has the sky fallen in? No, and that's that. How has your reading year been? Did anybody have a good reading year? If you did, please represent yourself below, because like we would love to hear it. The rest of us want to hear some success stories out of all of this. And otherwise, I will see you guys soon for another video.